Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking into our latest TDR Trade Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Thanks for checking in today. Big topic of conversation is institutional interest. Where is it at within the cannabis space right now? As our guest is going to come in, he manages one of the biggest funds in this overall industry. So, I want to get an update on the level of interest, the level of conversations that a lot of these institutions are having. So, let's jump into it. Welcome in TDR co-host Anthony Varrell here on a Tuesday. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you as well. It's been
Yeah.
a busy week so far.
I don't know if you saw a little of that RNC convention last night, but interesting to say the least. But we'll get into that a little bit later. But let's welcome back to the podcast Matt Hawkins, founder and managing partner of Entourage Capital, private equity firm that has let out hundreds of millions of dollars in this industry to many companies. Good to see you. Happy Tuesday.
Yeah, good to see you guys. Thanks for having me.
Yes. What's it been? Well, 3 months. I think we last saw you at the Benzenga conference. But I think for the most part, Matt, I really do believe that we're out of this growth stage, a startup stage, and we're now in this mature growth stage of this industry. But we look at a lot of the major MSOs, all signs point in the right direction fundamentally. So you've, run one of the biggest funds overall in the industry. Where do you think we are right now when it comes to fundamentally the state of this industry?
I agree with what you said, but all the MSOs and other plant touching businesses are just waiting with bated breath to see, when rescheduling happens to get
Yeah,
ready
of
to
course.
that's they can't the MSOs that are doing well right now are still taking capital from high yield lenders. They're still either not paying enough taxes to just because they know what's going to be happening here in advance. They're using workarounds to avoid it, but the reality is their balance sheets still reflect deferred taxes or
Yeah.
unpaid taxes, and they're not going to be able to access cheaper capital even when institutional capital comes in until these things are cleared up. Now that's also cart before the horse. I think before rescheduling, you're not going to see a lot of institutional lending come in, but regardless, it's still something they're all looking forward to because it frees up millions, untold millions of dollars in free cash flow.
Yeah. Have you
Or
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, Chad.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, as it relates to that, I mean, I know that we talk about deferred taxes on the balance sheet as well as the financial well-being of a lot of these companies. I mean, is it your opinion, or have you heard anywhere that would reinforce the notion that we should see Schedule 3 pass before the election or before the inauguration, or it's still just up in the air?
I think your guess is as good as mine. I don't see any
Yeah.
reason to believe that it wouldn't. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
this is a non-legislative process that there are timelines attached to it, and it seems to be tracking according to what was laid out when both agencies, render their opinions. So, I'm still hopeful it'll be sometime in November. But I've said on I've said on this podcast and many others before that
Yeah.
every time I try to prognosticate something from a governmental standpoint, I'm wrong.
Aren't we all? Aren't we
Yeah.
all?
Yeah,
I mean,
but
just as a slight follow up to that, I mean, would it be safe to say that I mean, we saw a large refi actually yesterday with Ascend. Would it be
right.
safe to say that the capital markets are, I guess, frozen to an extent, waiting for these catalysts
Yeah.
such as Schedule 3, or safe?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no there is. I mean, short of the top tier MSOs, there's getting access to capital, but it's still not bank rate capital.
Yeah.
There is no money in the space.
Yeah. So if we get rescheduling, let's fast forward to the current state of the industry. If that announcement happens, it still doesn't really allow when it comes to a lot of the safe harbor language and safe banking. But if we get an announcement for rescheduling, what does the state of the industry look like from an institutional standpoint?
I think it improves. I mean, I've mentioned on this podcast before that we were hopeful to have it launched before the beginning of the summer, but now that we're in the throes of the summer, it's not going to launch until September. But we will be launching our fourth fund with an institutional partner. So it's just a matter of it's when, not if, and we're hopeful that it can be sometime in September.
What's the interest level, consensus, the stuff that you've been hearing since the rescheduling language and topics started to circulate? And now it looks like all systems seem go. Again, we've struck out every time when it comes to understanding what happens in Washington. But I think there's a lot of people confidently do feel that Schedule 3 does happen. So what's the overall interest level in conversations that you have had related to it?
Yeah, and honestly, I have not canvassed the market to see what people are thinking because we haven't launched. However, uh, our anchor investor is the driver behind this, and it's as institutional can get. So that's exciting. I will say that I think once we have a closing, we'll see if it produces a result like Lemmings will follow this money. I don't know.
Yeah.
I do know that a lot of the family office and high net worth capital that's been in the space for a while now has fatigue and is dried up.
Yeah.
So it's going to have to be new capital coming in here to right the ship up from a capital formation standpoint.
Yep.
Are you seeing anything that's interesting from a fundamental standpoint? I mean, pricing, stabilization in certain markets that we talk about all the time, or it's kind of just business as usual, and we literally are just waiting for these catalysts in terms of.
Everything you said, I agree with. I mean, it's
Okay.
a great time to be investing in the space
Yeah.
because, arguably once rescheduling happens, you may see valuations go up because there may be some type of inflow of capital. I don't know, but right now, with valuations as low as they are, and with the dearth of capital, if I were sitting on several $100 million, I would be looking to deploy it.
Yeah.
I would look at the confidence level. Like when you look at what Ascend announced yesterday, that was the 5th largest debt deal yesterday, as you posted on LinkedIn, and the largest in nearly 2 years. So we're really starting to see more and more confidence from investors when it comes to the leading operators within the industry. Is that some of the dialogue that you continue to feel and hear as well? Because that was obviously a big step in the right direction. And as I said before, biggest announcement pertaining to that debt in nearly 2 years, which was, congrats, obviously, to Ascend.
No, again, agree with everything you're saying. There's no question that the macro situation of where things are headed from a rescheduling standpoint is driving some of this. I don't know if that deal gets done without the rescheduling on the horizon.
Yeah.
So before the debate, I know I was kind of positively thinking about a Biden presidency come 2024, come November. Do you think that the potential for a Donald Trump presidency or the Republicans taking the White House changes the calculus as it relates to the investment thesis in the cannabis industry at all?
I don't think so, because Trump has said all along that he's going to leave it to the states.
Yeah.
What could affect things is if the far right flank takes over both the House and the Senate. That's a different conversation. I mean, look at this. The reconciliation bill that the Republicans just put through that tried to tamp down the rescheduling. I mean that's pomp and circumstance because that can't be done legislatively right now. So I'm not concerned about. I'm more concerned about that than I am the presidential election.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think of JD Vance? What do you think of the JD Vance announcement?
I've been remiss to study up on what his cannabis position is. I'm guessing it's probably not
he's
that
four
great.
states. He's 4 states' rights. He obviously voted no on SAFE.
Yeah.
I guess the light at the end of the tunnel for me is the fact that he's 39. He skews much younger in age versus any of the GOP members, for instance, that signed on, the 25 that signed on to that letter against rescheduling.
Yeah.
So, I'm hoping that Trump putting him as VP potentially signals a changing of the guard or a changing of the thought process within the GOP to maybe skew towards the younger generations of politicians that are currently in the establishment versus the senior citizens that penned that letter that are sitting within the ranks of government still.
Yeah. Look, could very well be the case, but But I'm just going to have to reserve comment on that
Yeah.
until I study a little bit more on it. But I don't, like I said, I just don't see things changing dramatically at the White House, no matter who it is. I think
Yep.
that the legislatively obviously is where the issues are, and if we can keep a balance, that's probably more helpful than anything else. Because Shad, we were talking before we came on the air. I mean, one of the things that we'll talk about kind of opinions of what people are hearing versus what's reality, or saying versus what's reality. I mean, at the end of the day, every single state that comes online here is what drives the math.
I know.
Yeah.
And now we've got, I can't remember what the latest thing is, but you've got well over half of America that lives in at least a robustly medically legal state, if
Yep.
not recreational. So these politicians have to freaking listen to that. And so, numbers are what they are. And in these swing states where that's important, marijuana may become an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Michigan is a perfect example.
Right.
Michigan, Ohio. I mean, these states where it's now legal or becoming legal. Pennsylvania. I mean, you think the Republicans would be smart to say, no, we can't allow this? I mean,
Yeah.
hell no, they're not. They can't do that.
Matt,
So,
are you frustrated with like just everything that's gone? Like, look, I understand. Like, there's a lot of people that have been in this space for a long period of time, and I think a lot of people are just, getting to the point where it's just like enough already. Like, we are at a stage now where, leading up to probably the biggest election ever, we're looking at rescheduling, and how a lot of these politicians don't really understand about this topic. To me, seems dumbfounded, because there's a ton of interest pertaining to this topic leading up to the election. But I'm shocked as to how little there's a lot of these politicians that don't really understand what's going on. Not even like, I don't expect them to be on top of things, the day-to-day stuff related to the space, but some of the questions that get brought up when I went to Washington, it's like they really have no clue at all as to what's going on.
well, there's another issue that compounds that, and that's the discrepancies in the farm bill. And what this loophole that continues to be a thorn in the side of the legalized THC world.
Yeah.
Something's got to get done to fix that or remedy it. And no matter what side you're on, whether or not you want you want the intoxicating cannabinoids legal, well, that's fine. But let's just make it a level playing field with what the THC world has to deal with. Because right now it's not a level playing field, and we all know the shortcuts that manufacturers are taking on because they can, because there isn't the seed to sale tracking like you have in the THC world. So that's a bigger issue to me, is the fact that there's a lot of, I mean, I live in Texas, and I've got guys ask me all the time, it's like, hey, how can you have this weed on the shelves? I'm like, it's not weed.
Correct.
Correct. And so having to explain that's where I get frustrated, Chad, is that it's the illogical packaging that's out there, but is only doing it because they can, and they can take advantage of what's nebulous right now, and that's just wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I was at my friend's house this weekend, who's a corporate lawyer. He's a pretty big corporate lawyer, and I show up with a bunch of hemp sodas and seltzers. They love them. And then they go, oh, can you get these for us? We'll give you money. We know you're a medical patient. I go, guys, they're at the Total Wine on the corner. They were dumbfounded. They were like, what do you mean I can go buy these at Total Wine and just be completely fine? I was like, well, let me tell you a little bit about the Farm Bill. And since these were all legal professionals, they're like, this makes absolutely no sense. Like, this is honestly the one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. There's a completely legal market operating within a loophole for something that was supposed to be industrial that's now turned into a CPG industry.
And look, we can sit here and argue about it all day. I mean, I know there's a lot of my peers that think there is a pathway for both to exist.
Yeah,
there is.
Well, that's fine, but it's got to be a level playing field, because right now the THC sales are being bastardized by this and very unfairly.
Yeah, I mean, the only way I see it is they rip out D9 intoxicating hemp products out of the Farm Bill, pair them with cannabis under the Schedule 3 regulations that they're going to cement, playing field. You need a license, maybe take away interstate commerce
Right.
from them so that everything is level.
And then guess what? Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 10 goes away, and it's just back to the way
Instantly.
it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And then
not right. I mean, it's just inherently wrong. But Chad, to your point about being frustrated, I mean, yeah, I've been in this business for 10 years, and I would have thought that we'd have a lot more progress, legislatively by now.
So what do you think
But
we're missing? What do you think we're missing right now in this space?
well, I mean, unfortunately, it's the fact that in the 10 years that I've been in this space, the nation has become more polarized than ever before, or at least in my lifetime. So you've got a far left and a far right
Yeah.
set of constituencies that are much more concerned about other things, and cannabis just becomes an afterthought.
Yeah.
And even if you just if you really think about this hard, it's really a centrist issue here, because the very beginning we had, the social equity component of this that was highlighted, which again we all know is important, but that's now, that can't be accomplished without a good business in place
Of
first.
course.
And so what's
Thank you.
happening is that you've got a lot of companies that just don't have good businesses, that can't provide that social equity reform. And then all of a sudden the far left decides, well, I don't have any time to spend this. But then by the same token, the far right says, well, we're not going to legislate this. This is, this is terrible. But yet they're okay with, having, whiskey, peddled across their states. And it's just a lack of common sense. And they forget the fact that there is a booming illicit market in every single state in this union that's operating tax free, and all that money could be generated for causes that left and right leaning people champion.
I know. When you think of the tax dollars, and like last week I had Emily Paxi on, and she was talking about how, look, a lot of junior analysts are getting more and more attention towards this space, and it's because the alcohol companies are complaining that their market share is just being like chewed out more and more and more. But like, we know big alcohol is probably going to come into this space at some point and start buying these companies out. So, I can
tell you right now. I mean, I will tell you right now. I have in our three funds, we have three very, very large alcohol and beer distributors. Their families are in our funds.
Yeah.
And so they are that was 100% driven for them to learn the space,
right,
learn what they can and can't do legally, and be prepared to strike when they can. But meanwhile, their sales are getting eroded by cannabis.
Yeah.
They know it, and they're open about it.
I mean, just look at what's going on in Minnesota. I mean, the hemp seltzers are eating into double-digit market share within the liquor stores that they're being sold through. I mean, that's going to be that's almost an experiment for the entire United States. Seeing how that rolls out.
So then you have, so you're right. So sales are going nuts at grocery stores and liquor stores. You've got the farm bill that needs to be amended, but you've got look what happened in Florida. You've got a huge farm lobby and hemp lobby that is contributing dollars to political campaigns for their benefit.
Right.
And all of a sudden, DeSantis, he was about to pull the plug on the hemp-derived, intoxicating cannabinoids, but guess what? He got a lot of money donated to him, and he didn't do it.
Yep.
Correct.
So, and he vetoed it. So there's that. Plus, now you have alcohol and companies that are generating higher revenues at their stores because of these products.
Yeah,
they've got deep pockets too. So if that were to go away, how are they going to react? So it's a problem.
With some of your investors, is this a question that gets brought up a little bit more so than it has in the past?
You mean the misunderstanding of what's in play?
Well, that's a concern. If I have an investor, you look at the
I'm just making sure you're at. But absolutely, we talk about that all the time to our investors.
So how do you answer that?
As honestly as I can. I was like, look, it's a loophole that we are, trying to figure out how to work around and get closed. And so, a lot of our companies that have mean, look at Cureleaf. It's a perfect example. Cureleaf for a while didn't do anything had nothing to do with CBD products. Well, now they are.
Yeah.
A lot of our other companies are doing the same. A couple of gummy manufacturers and even excuse me, single state operators are getting into that game because they can, recognizing that they can't make a huge capital expenditure because it could be shut down tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Wana. Wana is one of the biggest legacy brands in the space, and I mean, they just went into hemp derived with that partnership with Happy. But I mean, that gets them national exposure, D2C, e-com business activated right away. Yeah, so I mean, it almost seems like,
Kana Gummies, which is a Thunderstorm brand. I mean, that's a big brand, and we're investors in them, and they are doing the same thing, but very little capital expenditure.
Well, if you can do it in a capex light way, it makes no sense not to. Because then the risk isn't there, obviously.
That's right.
So if I were to ask you guys to both put on your policymaker hats, like when we look at this farm bill, it needs to be changed and changed immediately. Like how fast does this need to get changed? Because if it doesn't get changed, like how fast do you think a lot of cannabis companies will start to dive in to like launching their own hemp derived products and expanding across the industry?
Well, they already are. I mean, I think that's
some are, of course, but
I think that ship is sailed. I think it's happening more often than we realize. And to Anthony's point, rightfully so, they got to take advantage of the market when they can.
For sure.
With respect to the Farm Bill revision, I mean, look, there's language right now that exists that does eliminate it. I don't know. It probably doesn't happen. The price not negotiated before the election is my guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I've heard the Farm Bill realistically will get re-rated in the next 12 to 18 months because this is an election year and then everybody needs to get settled in and then it's a very large bill. So yes, it does need to get re-rated tomorrow, but it's probably not going to get done until second half 2025, being realistic.
Yeah. Also want to touch on a LinkedIn post that you posted about the state of Colorado. And I thought this was interesting. There's a downward trend, which is actually a good thing in this particular case for the accessibility for people of underage having accessibility to cannabis. Since the actual state launched adult use, can't believe it's been 10 years already, but where does time go? But again, another example as to how much stuff is being smeared about, a negative light on this industry right now versus like what is being said versus what is actually going on. But that was a telling sign, to say the least, when you shared that information. But definitely a positive step in the right direction. And when those anti-legalization groups are highlighting basically accessibility, Darren Weiss was on a couple of weeks ago, and it's like it's Schedule 3 is about research. It's not about accessibility. And I think that's the big thing that people need to be educated on, right?
You're exactly right. But the I'll call them the layperson who's not in cannabis. I mean, very few people, when I talk about, this rescheduling, they look at me like I've got, 3 heads, and they don't understand what that is. And so having to explain that.
Yeah.
And even smart people, when they hear it, they say, well, that doesn't really change the legality. And I was like, no, it doesn't. But the main thing is it gets rid of this penal tax that we always talk about. But to your point, you can just look at the data in these states where it's been accessible and legal, and the numbers are what they are. I mean, Colorado's, it does become harder, especially when markets in Colorado took a long time to get there. But a lot of times where the illicit market has been tamped down a bit, that's even better for policing this to keep away from minors. Because, going into it, like, for example, when my daughter was in college, I told her, and she was in Connecticut, and right when it went legal, I was like, listen, until you're 21, don't even think about using a fake ID to go into a dispensary. Because it's not like going into a bar or a liquor store. They run this through a system that will take that and throw it away. And if you're really unlucky, they may call the police on you. So it's a real deal, more so than it is getting into a bar or going into a liquor store.
And that is
tell people that,
which is wrong. I mean, I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying it's just we've got more stringent ways of checking identification than these other industries do.
Yeah, I tell people that all the time. But it's not like being a teenager and going to buy beer at a gas station. You are not going to purchase product at a cannabis dispensary. It's literally impossible.
Yeah.
I
It's the
couldn't
biggest
even.
argument for legalization.
I wasn't even allowed when I was in Denver last year with you, Anthony. Being Canadian, I walked in and they said, "Nope, not
It's
American citizen. Out
it,
you go." And I was just like
I
smearing up my nose on the window. But what a guy!
trust me, I wouldn't have it any other way. The fact that it is so stringent is great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Agreed.
Sorry, you highlighted too about the year-to-date performance of the U.S. Cannabis Spot Index, and it's around the $81 range. So when we look at like just growth in general, what states come to mind as far as how the each state has performed this year? Like, is there, you mentioned Michigan earlier, but there has been some key states I think that have done very, very well. Illinois just reaching $1 billion in revenue last week, so the Midwest seems to be having a good year compared to years before.
Yeah, the Midwest for sure. Maryland. Maryland's a great example. Maryland has consistently been a good state since even before it passed rec, but since it's passed rec, it's been a very good state. But the Midwest is definitely is becoming the one that you can look to say, here's a way to do this that seems to be working.
Yeah.
It's and until states like California decide that they're the way they're doing it is wrong, and New York for that matter.
Yes.
That it's going to continue to be this way.
Yeah.
Do you think California ever gets it right and reforms their system to where it's in favor of the operators? Because I mean, it's been years now and they haven't seemed to address anything.
No,
and I was reading an article this morning that the social equity program is about to just flop. It's basically there's an existential crisis within the social equity component of the state as the retailers just can't operate.
Yeah, it's I think it's close to the bottom, but it's probably going to go a little further for it to even get the attention of someone like Gavin Newsom. But but it's incredibly disappointing that Sacramento can't figure out how to do this.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Last thing I'll ask you, election night, Amendment 3, Florida. If Floridians vote in favor to pass adult use cannabis, not only for the state of Florida, what do you think this does for the overall industry?
It'd be a huge, huge win. And the big thing for me is that it'd be coming from Florida's a strange mix. I mean, it can be you could there's parts of the state that are incredibly conservative, but there are also parts of the state that are incredibly left leaning. Yeah. But they've got a very bombastic out there governor who's on the right, and most of the country looks at Florida as a right leaning state. So from perception alone, it's going to be a huge win for the industry.
Yeah. I think you're right, and quite arguably the biggest legal market in the world, right?
Yeah, could be.
All right. So, Ray, the big takeaway here today, I think, is that a lot of conversations are taking place where we need new institutional money, obviously, to go to the next step, you think, for this industry. But if we do get rescheduling, you do think some institutional interest in buying will start to take place, right?
I did.
Well, incremental steps, right?
That's right. That's all we can ask
for.
Rescheduling. Well, listen, good seeing you. Always great having a conversation with you. You going to be in Chicago for Benzenga in September or early October? I forget when the date is.
Yep, we'll be there.
Good stuff. Hopefully by then we got a Schedule 3 announcement. Hey, we got some good news last year while we were in Chicago, so let's hope
fast forward.
Yeah, right. I keep hearing some rumors about safe and lame duck session, but again, who knows? I think Mitch McConnell retiring, that's interesting, but there's some plots, stories within the storyline, over the next few months that'll be interesting to see how things materialize. But wouldn't that be nice to have rescheduling and safe banking passed at some point before the end of the calendar year, and we can just forget about this conversation we just had, right?
Yeah.
Always good catching up with you. Let's keep in touch, okay, Matt?
All right, guys, be good. We'll see you.
Take care. Hey everyone, thanks for watching our latest podcast. What'd you all think? Is there any information that we're missing? Is there anything you want us to cover? As these industries heat up, we're getting access to more and more big hosts. So let us know the questions that you want us to ask for you. As usual, smash that like button. We want this to go viral. Click on that bell for all notifications for the latest interviews that we're doing. And as usual, Let's build this community. Subscribe to our channel because we appreciate it, because we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.